Hey, friends. I have been running an interesting experiment the last few days, in that I haven't done a video post in about 4 days. And it's been really interesting because I reflected on this sort of as it was happening throughout the, the, the 4 days, a little bit beforehand, and I've been sort of in a lot of ways looking ahead to this or envisioning this for quite some time. And so, for anybody who hasn't followed my posts for a while, I started this process of doing a daily video post. I committed to doing one post every single day for a year initially, starting January like 4th. I wasn't right on the new year, but it was like only a couple days after the new year, 2021. And which means that this coming, the upcoming January would be the 4 year threshold of that, this post. And I say I made a 1 year commitment because I wanted to choose a time period that was so long that at least for the first 6, 8, 9 months, I would not be thinking at all about when it would end. I would just be doing the practice. And the practice was show up every day and speak from the highest place that I can access in myself. Speak to my life and about my life, about what I see, about my relationships. My daughter has grown up 3.5 years since I started this post. The processes of life. Speak to the processes of life from the highest place I know how. And there was a kind of commitment, pretty explicit early on. I forget how I made it explicit, but I know that it was, for me, it was unquestionable that by assuming a perspective that took a truly broad, generous, love-based view of life, I would have no choice but to interpret every event, every circumstance, everything that happened to me as a gift, as something that the universe is offering me to help me evolve. And I've spoken numerous times over the past 3.5 years about what a daily practice of going to that place and speaking from that place has done for me. It's been transformational. It's created a transformation in my ability to autonomously and at will assume a perspective of universal benevolence, universal abundance, and just genuine trust that everything that happens to me is helping me. I've also mentioned many times that while I can arrive at that place and speak from that place every single day, I can also slip back out of that perspective and no longer feel that way about certain events that occur to me, that happen to me, that come careening into my awareness or my life. So, it's not a walk in the park and it's not a silver bullet, but it's a practice of consistently going there. That doesn't mean that I'm claiming I can spend all 24 hours there every day. It means I'm claiming I can get there every day. And when you get there every day, it starts to ripple into the rest of our life. There's just no way that it doesn't. Now, I say that the last 4 days I haven't done a video post, and that is a significant moment in this process for me. I had only ever missed a single days, and I think I'd only missed 2 or 3 of them in the entire 3.5 years so far. And it was really only recently, it was really only the beginning of this summer that I consciously decided I'm not going to do a post today. And then a couple months later, I consciously decided I'm not going to do a post today. It was in the spring. The first one was in the spring. The very first one was back in April. And one thing that had happened to me over the course of these years, I made a 1-year commitment, but then at the end of that 1 year, I realized what the practice was for me. And I was like, why would I ever not do this? Why would I ever go a day without doing this? So I simply extended that time period, and I had a commitment to do this indefinitely. And at some point, maybe around 3 years in, or a little 2.5 years in, I started to question whether this commitment was of value. Clearly, it was of value, but I started to question whether the commitment was a commitment to the highest value, because I started to observe that while I indeed did show up every day and speak from the highest place I could locate in my psyche, and while that is and remains transformational in some ways, it's also, I observed that it was also ultimately a stand-in for an even deeper process where there's something that comes through me that's worth developing. And by every day showing up and coming in with a new insight or just whatever kind of hit me that day, I was giving myself the feeling of speaking from a deeply creative, deeply enlightened, deeply just a powerful place within myself. But I was, in some subtle way, allowing that to be enough, allowing that to satisfy an urge that actually was growing over time to really develop some of what I've captured, some of the pearls that I've captured throughout this process. And when I started to observe that, that's when I started to realize, okay, I think there will be an end to this practice. Not an end to the practice. I'll almost certainly continue some form of this practice for the rest of my life. But I think the absolutely regimented nature of it, doing one every single day, might shift and give way to a practice where things arise and I develop them and I express slightly less often, but more deeply. And the last 4 days, I've been very conscious about observing where I was each day, what I was doing. We were on a trip to Arizona. I was with my family. And I was putting time in on projects, some of which are multi-year projects, and some of which there was a moment yesterday when a stroke of inspiration hit me. And in the morning, I had a vision of myself staying up late at night and writing it down. Then we had a road trip back from Arizona, and a daughter who was blotto tired, and we fell into bed. We got home, and we just wanted to fall into bed. I'm yawning just thinking about it. And But I said to I caught myself at like 10 o'clock. And I was like, it's now or never. I can go to a video post, talk about this stroke of inspiration, or I can sit down and write. And so I didn't sit down. I stood at the piano on my iPad and just typed. And spent 2 hours, over 2 hours, writing this thing. And unfortunately, it's not something I can share. But it was a conscious choice to use that creative energy in the way that feels like the highest calling now. And so in some small way, in some strange way, my willingness to not do a daily post for the last couple days has been a pretty, I would say, in some ways, a courageous act. Because for a while there, I worried what would replace this practice if I stopped doing it. And so, in other words, my continued practice started to be tinged with fear that I would lose something if I quit. And that's not an abundant place from which to do a practice. That's not a faith. That's not an expression of faith. It starts to become an expression of fear. And even if in the moment I'm very present and I'm regarding my life from this vantage point, and I've become very practiced at that, at verbalizing things from the perspective of this kind of universal abundance, universal beneficence. That doesn't mean that the underlying impulse was staying pure. And so, in some way, my willingness to put it down and the manifestation of that energy in a new form is really exciting to me. Means I've turned a corner in some way. And I'm going to continue this practice. It's a great thing. I can show up and do this anytime. But it's not substituting for anything else that's really calling to me. I noticed that I was sitting on a porch in Arizona yesterday morning or the day before and realizing that and feeling like, wow, I just dropped that fear. Just going a couple days allowed me to drop the fear about what I might lose. I didn't do a post for 3-4 days in a row. Turns out I lose nothing. So, it's exciting to be able to take hold of this and now feel like I can back up a little further off of it, feel like I can step back further from it and employ this process and employ this practice with more awareness and a deeper level of courage. And I hope a deeper level of engagement than I've experienced yet. So that's where I am today, folks. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Have a great day.